Greetings and welcome to the home slice. This is a standard intro. If you already know what's up with my 40mm Manila rope testing, the ANDE rope test, then you can skip to this time listed on screen. This is where the actual edge test begins. If you haven't been here before, then you've caught me in the middle of a testing series where I'm taking Victorinox knives because they're simple steel that's mainly just steel. There's not a bunch of extra alloys and carbide things going on in them. And I'm testing what different sharpening stones do to them. I'm testing fine, medium, and coarse stones individually. Then I'm taking the best from those and I'm making what's called a dual grit edge. If you're new to the channel, a dual grit edge is where you sharpen one side coarse or medium and the other side of the edge you sharpen fine. It has some really interesting characteristics. Usually it creates an aggressive edge that lasts longer than it normally would with either coarse or fine, with some exceptions, which we're testing to find out. Anyway, my test consists of, I've got a little goofy rig that I slice through a 1 centimeter thick sisal rope, and it's on a 45-degree wedge. It's intended to transfer that force down, and then I measure how many kilograms of pressure it took to slice through the rope while holding the rope vertical. That's intended to take forward motion and quantify how much pressure it took to slice through. This gives you some rough idea of edge aggression. The next test is to cut through a 40mm thick Manila rope, and then I test on a best machine tester to test how keen and nice the edge stayed. I do that until it's over 400 grams on the best tester, checking with Microscope and checking to see when it loses shaving capability in between tests. After 3, I will hammer the edge into a pine piano leg, and that's just to see if any of the edges break on impact. There are certain sharpening methods I've found that create an edge that's not as robust to impact tasks, and I want to kind of weed those out because for a working edge, I want it to be reasonably durable. Anyway, that's what we're testing for today. In just a second, we'll skip right over to the test footage, and I will let you know what the finishing stone that we're actually testing was.
Just a note before we get started, some guys have asked for scaling, and this is a measuring tape in millimeters. And as I try to get that mark on the left-hand side centered, I find I can't quite get the mark on the right on screen. So my best guess is that fully zoomed in, as all these tests are, my microscope, the full screen shoots about 1.8 millimeters. Now I've put 36 hyphens on screen, which means each of those is roughly 50 microns. So I'll bring that back later in the videos for scale. Alright guys, another dual grit test, and we've got some clarity that this is actually a little bit crisper than my normal dual grit edge using the Suehiro Cerax 3000 grit as a fine. And I've frozen the number right here at 2.2, which looks like when you take the rig weight at 0.2, but actually the Spyderco 800 mesh was better because it read at 0 and was literally 0.2 kilos. But that's a long story, you need to watch that video. We'll just compare to my traditional King 6000 grit edge step by step, and I've frozen it here at a reading of 2.8. So significantly better aggression at the outset from the Suehiro Cerax. And we'll go to the microscope and actually look at the two edges back to back, starting with the Suehiro Cerax 3000 grit. This is the Suehiro Cerax surface of the edge, and it's just laser straight with great fine sharpening lines. So really liking the geometry that it's producing. I'm really liking the look of the finish on there. This is the coarse side on that 250 grit diamond, and you can see immediately against the last two tests of the Japanese natural and the Shapton 8000 grit that we've got much less deformed steel, and I think this is what we should be seeing in a dual grit edge. We'll take a look at my traditional dual grit edge to see whether or not we can confirm that. This is the King 6000 grit stone sharpened side, and I have to say the apex doesn't look quite as clean. We'll have to see how the results from the Cerax compare to the King 6000 grit, but I definitely like the look of the edge that the Cerax is producing. Taking a look at that coarse side, on the King stone, I've convexed it a little bit here, so it's hard to tell whether there is much reflection. I'm sorry, that's my mistake. But we'll just have to go to the performance benchmarks to see whether we can identify the differences between these two edges. But I will say, this thoroughly confirms to me that the last two edges were not normal dual grit edges, and they were insufficiently cleaned up. Chomps through the rope at 307, this Cerax edge. Very, very good aggression. And as I was doing the test, this was one of the easiest tests to date, so very pleased with the cutting action of it. Still holding on at pass number 2, returning a 363 number. And on pass 3, we set a new record above any stone so far, even the Arkansas Translucent. So this is really what you want to see a dual grit edge doing, is coming to life late in the game and outlasting other edges with aggression without bending. And here, as we look at the apex from this side, I have to say I can't see anything that makes me displeased, which makes me think that this Suehiro Cerax 3000 grit may be a new contender to replace my King 6000 grit as my main dual grit sharpening stone. I'm seeing tiny little glints at the very edge apex of perhaps bent metal, but nothing like we've seen in the past. And depending on the performance benefits, I think this could be a really compelling option for dual grit edges. I really have liked it. Now I have to apologize because I seem to have lost the footage of the second aggression test. It returned a result of 4.2 kg, which is in amongst the best, but not the best number that I have recorded thus far. But speaking of bests, so far the best reading after the baton has been 359, and we have surpassed it and beaten the Shapton with this edge, which is excellent. To have a dual grit edge that cleans up so well that it doesn't experience major losses during the edge durability test is phenomenal. And the edge isn't perfect under the microscope, but I have to say I'm very pleased with the performance of this Suehiro Cerax 3000 grit stone as a fine side and as something to clean up a dual grit edge. Look at that coarse side. It's still got a little bit of texture, you can see, but so straight and even. The aggression was so good. Heading back to the 40mm Manila rope, we get one more pass out of this, which is good longevity. Not the best, but I think that what it shows us is that this Cerax stone is a great contender to be used in conjunction with other coarse stones as a fine side of a dual grit edge. If you want to see my last test, where I tested a dual grit with Shapton Glass 8K stone, the link is on screen now. Peace out from the home slice.